This episode of the Nerf Herder Council is brought to you by Audible. Visit audibletrial.com/NHC for your 30-day trial and a free audiobook download. Warning: the following podcast contains irreverent humor, exceptionally nerdy opinions, potential cursing, and plenty of love for the prequels. If any of the preceding offends you, please turn off this podcast immediately, and may the Force be with you.
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder!
You can't use that word! Only we can use that word!
You're tuned in to the Nerf Herder Council, your source for Star Wars opinion, conversation, and debate. Featuring your hosts, JT, Star Wars. It's freaking Star Wars. Like, what, you gonna go to the fucking Jedi library or something? AJ.
Yeah, Rebels is a lot like our show, where we think we have a good idea and then it just fails in execution.
Steve.
Show me on the doll where the last Jedi touched you.
On this episode of the Nerf Herder Council, it's part one of our two-part episode with Star Wars Superfan and documentarian Kenn Bell. We discuss everything from Bantha tracks to the new Cassian Andor TV show.
This is the Nerf Herder Council.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Nerf Herder Council. I am your host, JT. With me is Steve. AJ, his late ass will be here shortly. He is crossfitting. He's the fit one of the bunch.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Should just make an AJ soundboard that we can pod in whenever he shows up late.
Yeah, we should.
Just a ton of one-word answers or something that we can just hit the buttons on the hotkeys here and act like we're having a conversation.
I know,
with
right? Well, as usual, everybody, we are brought to you by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/NHC for your 30-day trial and a free audiobook download. And do not forget that you can get your official Nerf Herder Council swag by going to shop.nerfherdercouncil.com, and you can get any one of 3 designs on pretty much anything you can imagine. So go there and grab some t-shirts, coffee mugs, mouse pads, whatever you feel like. So support the show if you would like. I know that we'll be wearing our stuff at Celebration because we are whores for publicity. So you might see us there. We got a really, really special episode here for everybody. We have a guest host on the Moof Milker mic Skyping in with us. And his name is Kenn Bell. And if that name rings a bell to some of you guys, if you are dog lovers like we are, especially me, you probably are familiar with his work on several different dog documentaries, most notably one called Second Chance Dogs that was on Netflix for quite some time. And it had to do with some of the Michael Vick dogs from the dogfighting ring and how they were rehabilitated and turned into family pets after that ordeal they went through. Ken actually hit us up on Twitter and we got a dialogue going, and he said he would love to come on the show sometime. We said that'd be great. So on the line with us is Kenn Bell, the dog documentarian, or I should just say documentarian though, right?
Well, we're trying. We're trying.
Right. So
good to be here, man. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming on, man. So you did do the Second Chance Dogs documentary.
Yeah.
And you've done a number of smaller stuff. Like, I know there was a Facebook series. So
yeah, you could see Second Chance Dogs on YouTube now. It was a year and a half on Netflix, which was awesome.
Yep.
But you could see it on YouTube. Just search Second Chance Dogs and ASPCA, and you could see the whole documentary there.
Perfect.
Yeah. Before that, I did one called Hero Dogs of 9/11, which is about the search and rescue dogs of 9/11.
Yep, that was an awesome one.
That one came. That was on Animal Planet also, because Second Chance Dogs also was on Animal Planet one time.
Yep.
And that was on there, and that was. That came about because in my Dog File series, which I did like 18 episodes, one of the was like a 7-minute episode about those search and rescue dogs from 9/11, and so we got that going from there. And now I'm working on a documentary about humans, So, you know, it's a long way out, probably a year before it showcases, but it's about a guy named Dr. Robert Johnson, and he was one of the first people to help. He was a coach, a tennis coach, and he actually helped break the color barrier in tennis in the 50s and 60s.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
Back when white people played in one league and black people played in another league, and he was a black man from the South that was just an incredible human being. And by sheer force of will, he helped break the color barrier. So that's what I'm working on now.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I will definitely be checking that out. I'm not just saying this because you're on the show, but I was a huge fan of your previous work, and being a huge dog fan, I saw that the Second Chance Dogs was my first exposure to what you did, and I loved it. And
thanks.
So whenever, anytime, man. And so whatever you're doing, I will definitely check it out because it's definitely very high quality stuff. So.
I try and make documentaries that could actually educate some people and change some opinions, and maybe something that can actually get changed. Things where people could actually maybe get involved and maybe make a change. I think that's kind of cool in this day and age with all that. I know you and me, because we talk on Twitter sometimes. Half the time on Twitter, we're just ducking because we're just worried about what people are going to yell about next.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's really exhausting, and this whole world where everything is either concrete, black, or white, when most of the world is gray, and most people do care about a lot of things. Most people do care about animals. It doesn't matter what your politics are. Most people care about other people, and that's what I'm trying to do with documentaries.
That's awesome, man. That's very cool. And I definitely agree with you. I mean, as you said, we've talked about that, via Twitter and everything about people getting offended by everything. And, I think you phrased it perfectly that things aren't black and white, they're gray. So, and speaking of things that are black and white and gray, why don't we get into some Star Wars stuff, since that is the reason that you're here?
Sure. Sure.
Now, you wanted to start out. You said,
stretched that segue.
Look, man, I'm a semi-professional, okay? It's better than either of you two could do, so there you go.
It was definitely the gray area of transitions.
Oh, look, AJ's here. Woo! There he is.
It's not the soundboard? I might have been saving that one.
Yeah, we just came up with an AJ soundboard for you, buddy, so that we just have one sentence answers, just repetitious stuff. I was got nothing, of course.
The soundboard's broke already.
I was waiting for the soundboard to kick in. What the hell, guys?
He bought it. So
come on, AJ, that would involve me doing work.
We don't do that on this show. But yeah, Ken, you had told us that you wanted to start out by telling us a story about how you initially saw the original trilogy, because you said that you saw them in the theaters when they actually came out in 77, 80, and 83. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, I'm old, so I'm up there in age a bit. I was 11 years old in 77, so... Yeah, when that movie came out, I don't know, back in the day, there was something called the 4:30 movie. And basically, it was like Army Week, or it was World War II week. And at 4:30 on channel, I don't know what it was, 7 or wherever, they would have a 90-minute movie every day, like a theme, And, so you always get excited to check that out. You didn't even realize back then that a 90-minute movie with commercials, man, they really must have edited the hell out of those movies to play them in that time. And I remember seeing the Star Wars commercial, a quick one, and just being I remember Luke and Leia on the about to swing across. I remember a stormtrooper. I remember some creature making a sound. It was Chewbacca. That's all I really remember. And it was just what the hell is that? And then we were going to see Rocky. And Rocky came out the year before. But back then, movies were in the movies theaters for a year or two. There wasn't, this is actually before VHS, about a year or two before VHS. And so my dad comes home from work, and we're going to go to Menlo Park Cinema, which was only two really gigantic theaters. Back then, there was no 20 plex, or anything like that. And so we're going to see Rocky. My brother wanted to see Rocky. So the four of us are getting ready, or three of us get ready. My dad comes home from work to get us. And he's like, listen, everyone at work's talking about this Star Wars movie. My brother wasn't too happy, but we decided we're going to go see Star Wars. So I'm figuring that this was like the next Wednesday or Thursday after it came out. So that would give all the guys at work. He was a union electrician. Okay. So guys over that weekend probably saw him. So that my first time was going to see that film. And I sat there at 11 years old. And, guys, man, there was no internet. There was 3 or 4 channels on TV. There were books that, I had encyclopedias that I would scour. It was just about drawing. I drew all day. I was an artist, and that's it. That's all you had. So I think like a lot of creativity comes out of boredom, and, not having video games. I had Pong when it came out,
Yeah.
And so we go see this movie and I'm sitting there and I remember to this day, the movie got over and I was just like, what the hell did I just see? Like what, and I cut home and I get out my drawings and I'm starting to draw and I'm trying to draw these white, like troopers. And I'm like, what was that? And the Darth Vader, like it's such a blur. I had to see it again. So over, 2 years, because it came out for a year, then it came back out for a year. And that was right after that was around the time, I believe in 79, where you could like rent it from like a VHS place or something. But my mom would drop me and my friend off at the theater on Saturdays and she'd go like to the mall or something. I saw it 30 times.
Damn.
Over and over. That was it. Because, there was none of this extra stuff. You're not going online and watching 5,000 videos about why you should hate The Last Jedi. There's nothing anywhere. I joined Bantha Tracks. I have all that stuff. If I ever meet you guys, I have a big binder, a Star Wars binder, and I have all the articles that were in the newspapers. And all in the first edition of Bantha Tracks, and I have the patch in there for
God. I remember Bantha Tracks.
Yeah, all that stuff, and the Star Wars poster book and the reviews, and like that was it. So you were dying. I would just sit and like draw every time I would remember it a little more. Yeah. I mean, even cameras were film. You weren't like bringing a camera into a movie theater to take a picture. You just, when you saw something on TV, it was so exciting to see like something like. I remember when the internet really kicked in about 10, 15 years ago and everyone started ripping on the holiday special.
Yes.
I loved it when I was a kid, and, I watched it recently. It is the only scenes of Luke, Han, and Leia outside of the trilogy that we still have to this day. The scenes when they're together.
Yep.
The rest of the stuff is, I mean, obviously it's horrible, but seeing them in the cockpit again and young, it is still kind of incredible. But like that was it was like nothing. There was just nothing that could compare to Star Wars. I mean, my dad loved it, I loved it. My mom enjoyed it, and then I told my mom, I said we were going the first day for Empire, and on the first day for Empire, my dad would bring home the newspaper. He came home early from work. When's the last time your father left work at halfway through to take you to see a movie on a Wednesday? Because Star Wars Empire Strikes Back came out on a Wednesday. And I grabbed the New York Daily News and I saw a picture of the AT-AT walker and it said Empire Strikes Back, 3.5 stars. I was like, oh my God. And we went to the same theater, but we had to sit in a balcony because it was so packed. And then finally, at the end of that movie, I told my mother, I said, when the new one comes out, when the next one comes out, I'm taking the day off of school. And then that was the time I took a day off of school. And, that was 11, 14, and 17. So it didn't matter that I was a junior in high school or whatever. We took the day off and we went and waited in line. And we had no problem with the Ewoks at first, So we had no problem whatsoever. But but that it's just, to everyone, I just can't, to younger people, you just can't explain it because they have no idea. It's like when MASH had its last episode, everyone I know watched it. They had 30 or 100 million people watched it, that doesn't happen anymore.
Yep. Yeah, I know that. Like, I mean, I know for me, and I mean, AJ too, like our experience, we saw it. Well, I saw the original 3 in the theaters, but I'm 10 years younger than you. So I saw A New Hope. Our local theater actually put out A New Hope like a month or two before Empire came out. It was like a special engagement type thing. So I saw I saw that when I was 4. I saw Empire like a month or two later. I was 4, and then I was 7 in '83. And AJ's 3 years younger than I am. So his first experience was with Jedi when he was 4, and
yeah, I wouldn't even remember it if I saw it at 4.
Oh, and that see that, but I mean, the imagery was so defined, and it was the stormtroopers were scary because it was like, oh, what are those guys like? Man, they can't be up to any good. Then Darth Vader comes around, and you're like, oh, that guy's just gonna kill everybody, And then Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon are just the coolest things you've ever seen. Yeah, I mean, it was just everything was so defined that even as a little kid, it was so easy to follow and so easy to get into. So, I mean, you're completely right in that, I mean, I love all Star Wars, as I'm sure you do too, but those first 3 movies, there was something fresh and something so potent about them that, because it was so new, I think it's just a whole different experience.
He just hit something.
So, having said that, you did want to get into, the direction of Star Wars or the new trilogy. Like, what is your opinion on that and where you think it's going? Do you think it's going well? I mean, you wanted to get into that kind of sort of topic.
I mean, I got when it started out, I got totally into it with The Force Awakens. I was excited again, I mean, I was excited when Phantom Menace came out too, until the second or third viewing, I started going, something's a little wrong here. But I love Star Wars, and I was amazed. I remember when I saw Phantom Menace, I was still amazed at how quickly he could capture the look again, even though he made that, I think, a bad decision on recording. I think those first 2 were recorded at 1080 video, and it's like I don't know how they're ever going to make 4K versions of those movies, but not at least Star Wars was film,
Yeah, sure.
But on the new ones, I was excited and ready to go. The first time I saw Force Awakens, I needed to go see it a second time. I didn't know how I felt. When I gave into it, I realized it was a lot of fun. But I really, I think there's just some things that shouldn't be excused. And I think it's ridiculous that it was basically Star Wars over again. I think.
Thank you.
And people that say, well, you got to get people back into it with the soft reboot. No, you don't.
Take that, Steve. I told you
this wasn't Star Wars.
Wrong.
You just don't have to. There's so much more you can do. It kind of just shows you how hard it is to come up with an idea, I guess, because like the third or fourth Death Star again.
Yeah.
Look at every movie that comes out in the past 5 years. It's all rehashes of things that came out 20 years ago. So Star Wars isn't any different.
Yeah. And, there's an argument that the people that made the movies in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, were more. I'm not saying I'm in their level because I'm not. I'm just saying, like me, you had to use your own imagination. You had to find things where you could find them. I remember back then between Lucas and Spielberg, I just remember seeing the movies with my dad and seeing that Spielberg would hit adult humor. And then he just get back to the fun, and he mixed it up in such a way where it got my dad back to being a kid too in the 40s, watching those serials,
Raiders of the Lost Ark is a perfect example.
Yeah, Raiders, everything Spielberg for 10 years, right? Everything
yeah, very true.
Years. It's not just them, E.T., Close Encounters. I remember going to theaters with my family for Close Encounters, and just being like, wow. And it was perfect because, Close Encounters, if it came out later, it probably wouldn't have overwhelmed people like it did when it first came out because it was so interesting, And I think that some people say that the scripts were better back then because the writers went to college for literature. And the writers nowadays, like me, I was a comic book guy, read comic books. You know what I mean? Where ideas are kind of, for every Dark Knight Returns, there are a million really bad comic stories. Yeah. And I worked at 2 comic book companies in my life, so I can say that.
Nice.
Hopefully, without anyone getting too pissed off at me. But it's just, here's my thing. Remember when you were a kid and you look at adults like they're all knowing? and then you turn like 15 or 16 and you ask your dad a question that you know the answer to, and he's wrong, and you go, holy shit. You know what I mean? You're like
Yeah,
holy
mind
shit,
blown,
they
right?
don't know. What was that?
Mind blown, right?
Yes, and then you become older and you realize adults don't know anything. They're just figuring it out every day, like you were as a kid.
Yep.
You know, and I look at that and I think about like if the 3 or 4 of us, like Lucasfilm said, we're restarting the Star Wars movies, right? Like, what would we do? We'd sit in a room for a month or 2 and just talk about what would be cool. And we'd like record it or we'd write it down. And I'm like, I don't see, like, I'm in the middle with The Last Jedi. I don't think it's the best. I don't think it's the worst. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I think when she goes to see him, you know, when Chewbacca drops her off, I think it's like almost a perfect film from that to the end. But it's not a perfect Star Wars film. It's a perfect film in that section. I think the Canto Bite thing is some of the worst stuff ever in a Star Wars movie. I think Rose Tico might be one of the worst written characters in Star Wars after Jabba. I don't blame her. You know, that people like to do that. Like, oh, are you saying something about her? No.
Wait, Jabba or Jar Jar?
Oh, sorry, Jar Jar.
Oh,
I was
thank you.
Say, holy crap, we got to jump into that.
No, Jabba's
somebody
awesome.
that hates Jabba the Hutt. Wow.
No, not at all. But you know, but I those little things where Lucas would always go back to like 3-year-old stuff. I was always like, you don't have to do that because kids don't really need that. You know, they don't need the fart joke. You know, that type of stuff. But you would think they would do that. So when I look at the new Star Wars movies, and clearly there's a problem. Lucasfilm knows there's a problem, right? And I loved Han Solo. I tell you why I think a lot of people don't. It was the first Star Wars movie without a climactic, the world's going to end story. And Star Wars has to start telling those tales because every movie can't end with a Death Star. I mean, even Rogue One ends with a Death Star, right? So
at least that one had an excuse, though.
Yeah, it did, and it's fantastic. But
unlike The Force Awakens, which is here's another giant Death Star. It's like super big Death Star,
a bigger one, and now it's 5 planets. Really,
exactly.
And in case you didn't get the reference, if you didn't get the reference, we're gonna put it in the movie to compare the Death Star to Starkiller Base, just so you know there's a similarity.
and I used to get mad at like there'd be like kids going like, yeah, but Darth Vader was forgiven, for killing 1 billion people on Alderaan, and now it's like 5 billion people with Kylo Ren, like 5 planets, and no one's even talked about it. You know? No one even mentioned after that happened. Oh, by the way, you know, you blew up 5 planets, like, and no one even seems to care in that world. But
they just shoehorn that in on like the last day of writing. They're like, oh yeah, have him kill the Republic too.
But we have to have it be 5. You know, it has to be 5 this time.
Well, to be fair, the guy running the New Republic was Joe Camel. So I mean,
he does look like Joe Camel.
That's true. That's true. God, that was a long time ago, huh?
See, we're not that much young. We're not nearly as.
Now you're getting up there. You're getting
exactly.
Up there. But like, so when I look at the problem, I don't really think it's Rian Johnson. It came before him. No one sat down and figured out what they're doing. Like we have a really solid storyline in the original trilogy and in the prequels, you know. And I watched the prequels recently, and it's amazing how many incredible things are in there, but mixed with some really bad stuff. You know what I mean? Like at 1 second in the prequels, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that's in this movie. And then the next sequence, you're like, that's one of the coolest things I've ever seen, you know? Mm-hmm. But like, how did they not sit down? It is unforgivable that we didn't get a scene with Luke, Leia, Chewie, and Princess Leia together again. I will never forgive them for not giving us that scene. Star Wars is about the fans. You know, it's a Star Wars film. That's why people are that's the biggest problem people have with The Last Jedi, right? That it's not a Star Wars movie. you have to give us what we want on these films. At least on those, you could do something interesting. You know, the Knights of Ren was interesting, and then they were forgotten. Hopefully not.
Yeah,
but
with the rumors coming out about that.
Yeah, but you saw that piece of paper with the costumes, and the dude from the JJ friend from Lost, and
oh yeah.
Yeah, he's a boring rebel commander.
Yeah.
Like everyone thought he would be one of the Knights of Ren. Like if you want to make something interesting, make it so it's not one bad guy again, and make it so it's 7 guys, and the Knights of Ren are now the bad guys. I mean, imagine how cool that would be to see 7 guys sitting up on a throne, but they're all sitting all over it, you know, and there's 7 guys and they all have their own personality, kind of like a Dirty Dozen type thing. You know, you got to try something different, but they seem to have absolutely like, everything might change when the new one comes out, because we'll see very quickly in a new one if JJ was really angry with what Rian Johnson did.
Yeah, for sure. But
I have no proof anywhere in Star Wars of that actually happening, where they actually listen and make big changes, like they actually care. You know, like I don't see that anywhere. So there's a really good chance that she is still a nobody's parents, that, you know, that he's going to be forgiven at the end, Kylo, for blowing up 5 people and killing his dad. My hero, you know, Han Solo and Chewbacca were everything to me. And it's like, okay, you know, but there seemed like, to me, it's like, I mean, how much better would it be if the first movie was Han and Leia had twins and Luke had 1 kid, and it was their adventure, and they grew up together and they had a relationship together, and the twins were a male and a female, you know, so you could have your Rey, you could have your Kylo, you could have, you know, whoever, I still don't understand why Han Solo and Princess Leia would name their kid Ben, since, well, Princess Leia never even met him.
Well, yeah.
Han Solo met him once. I don't really get that, but you know, but like, why, you know, and then they grow up, and then and that's the first movie, and they get into shit, and things happen, and they're a hero, and you know, Luke and Han and Princess are in it just as much as them, and build it up to the point where one of them goes bad, and his twin has to actually be the one that tries to get him back. Her undying love for her brother is what brings him back, you know, and then he uses. He you know, is forgiven because he actually dies to save her, maybe doing the whole thing with Darth Plagueis, right? Mm-hmm. Bringing that cut back around from the first trilogy, that like he does figure out how to make life come back, but to make life come back, he has to die, and he does that, you know. It could be so powerful, and instead we have Finn, Rey, and a dude who wasn't supposed to live through the first movie. Like they ended the second movie, they introduced themselves to each other.
It's crazy though, because that is like our new trio of heroes, and to think that it took them 2 movies before they actually crossed paths. Like in the original trilogy, you always picture like it's always Leia and Luke and Han and Chewbacca, and yet the amount of time they're actually on screen together after the first movie is very short. They're usually off doing their own subplots and whatnot. But
yeah, there wasn't a lot in Empire, was there?
No, Luke is on Dagobah, and Leia and Han and Chewie are over on Bespin. You know, and then Return of the Jedi, they even make reference to the fact that, like, hey, it's been a while since we've, you know, been together because we've been off doing our own things.
Right.
But Ken, it's interesting that you bring up that whole storyline that you pitched for the sequel trilogy, because I don't know, are you familiar with any of the what they now call the Legends?
Oh, sure. I didn't read them all, but I know all about them. I have too much time on my hands, so I watch too many videos, and I know about them all. But at least they would have had relationships, right? Those 3 characters, because they kind of grew up together. So there'd be like a camaraderie there. There'd be fun. You know, they'd be close to each other, be tight knit. You know, I mean, they didn't even think about, like, okay, so now we have a new droid, and you one of the better things in the trilogy, you created a new droid that everyone loves. I'll give you that, JJ. BB-8's awesome. Well, who's this BB-8? You know what I mean? Like BB-8 is actually, what's his name?
Poe.
Poe's, right? Yeah,
Yep.
like it's not hers. So is hers now R2 or is it 3PO or like who's?
It's a little salacious, actually. They kind of pass BB-8 around a bit.
Yeah, nice. it's a weird thing, but there was no real thought into any of it, and it's just shocking to me that a multi-million-dollar organization would do something like that without having and listen, man, the Resistance and the New Order. Don't you just want the Empire? Don't you like just want Sith? You know what I mean? But now you're dealing with the fact that there's more than two because of the Knights of Ren, and now there's a problem. And if they stay around each other too long, they might kill each other. So they're off destroying the galaxy separately half the time because they don't want to be around each other because they're trying, but they're young and stupid or something. Mm-hmm. Like there's so many interesting ways to go. Like the New Order, it's like a fake gang of like wannabes, and it's like, is that really, maybe in a book, do you really want to do that in the last trilogy? Like, didn't you want Kylo at the end of Last Jedi to be sitting on a throne going, someone saying saying the New Order, and he stops him and he says, the Empire, you know what I mean? It's back. I am now Darth Vader, like full psychotic by the end of the second movie. But he's not. He saved Rey, and he's not psychotic or anything. He didn't kill his mom either.
I think I'm kind of
beautiful.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of glad they didn't do that, because I think in looking at, Star Wars since George Lucas sold it, I think the one thing that always stands out to me, with the exception of Rogue One, I think that might be the outlier for me in this, is that the only person that really truly got the spirit of Star Wars was George Lucas, because there's just, and I love the new movies, don't get me wrong. I completely agree with you. I mean, this is like something I've beaten into the ground on the show, but The Force Awakens, after the first about 45 minutes, it just rehashes A New Hope. Like, I've already seen this.
And too much, one thing I didn't say, like, just like, you got to know when to cut a few jokes.
Yeah.
Like it's just too much, but at least it was more situational. Like Ryan didn't quite get Star Wars humor with that beginning where he threw everything off balance with that ridiculous phone call joke.
Yeah.
It was just like, I sat there in the movies and it was a spectacular battle sequence, but I sat there going, what the hell?
Yeah, your mom joke, and Star's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and then I understand it was hard to come up with something for Luke to do with the saber, but are you telling me people in the crew didn't laugh when that was done on set, that they couldn't tell, like, boy, that's coming off bad? You know what I mean? With like, couldn't you have just thrown it on the ground? Instead of making a womp.
This is the thing I love about The Last Jedi that a lot of people don't really talk about, is that it has that spirit of trying to take chances that, George Lucas was always known for. I mean, say what you want about the prequels, he did something completely opposite from the original trilogy. And, The Last Jedi completely turned so many things that we knew and loved on their ear. And I mean, some of it doesn't come off, but to me personally, a lot of it does. And I love that after a rehash of A New Hope, we get something completely out of left field. I thought that was cool.
But it was left field without like knowing that there's a center field and a right field and an infield and where the batter is. You know what I'm saying? Like it was doing it all, forgetting that there's any parts that are going to be connected to this.
So you're saying it was subverting it for subversion's sake?
Yes, and that's all he talked about after the movie was like, I had to find out what is the absolute, and I'm like, yeah, I know that's Sid-filled screenwriting. I get it, that you have to find out like what's the worst thing that could happen to them. Listen, here's something I usually say to people. In the olden days, Luke Skywalker takes within 30 minutes, Luke is in, right? And that's 30 minutes in 1977 time. If you ever watch the first Star Wars movie with a child, you will realize that's a really slow movie.
AJ has said that before.
All you've got to do is try to watch them in episode order, end episode 3, and then begin 4, and you will feel like you just ran into a brick wall. The pacing is ridiculously slow at the outset.
Yeah, and it's just the way movies were made once, and it's okay, and it's beautiful, and it's fine, and it's iconic. And I understand that kids nowadays have so much going on that they need more stuff, but Luke was in. Now, if that was made nowadays, Luke would have been in about 15 minutes. And what I mean is he would have taken the call to arms and said yes, and in that movie it takes like a half hour or so. With Finn, it takes an entire movie for him to just be in for Rey, and then another entire movie for him just to be in for the rebellion. He would have been. If this movie was done 25 years ago, 40 years ago, he would have been in for the rebellion in 20 minutes and you would have loved it. It's crazy how they just stretch things out. Like, did anyone say to Ryan, excuse me, sir, this isn't 12 movies. Like, it's only one more after this. So give us something here. You know what I mean? Like, what is going on?
I think that's one of the fatal flaws of The Last Jedi, at least for me. I think it was a terrible decision to have it start like 30 seconds after the other one ends, because that just throws everything off.
Yeah, and listen, but that's our episodic world we have nowadays with TV, and I watch more TV than I watched in the past, and it's better than most movies nowadays. Just got done finishing the last season of Vikings, and it's just spectacular show. And but that's that thought process. If you look at comic books, right? There was the guy that kind of reinvented Spider-Man, not McFarlane. He was a writer, David. I forget his name. But he started doing like an entire issue of Spider-Man where Spider-Man just sat on a bed talking to Mary Jane for an entire episode. It was conversational, like Friends or something like that. It was, how film started changing about 15, 20 years ago to like that, where there was less of a story being told and more of conversations between people. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of these people come from now. They're giving us these conversations, and they're taking a long time to get to the story. But if you look at the great films, 10 minutes, boom, you're in. 15 minutes, half hour, end of the first act, another half hour, second act, third act, done. And it was very, and they're stretching it out. I think it's because they have less ideas, and because it's easier just to write like real. Just dialogue with two people going, hey, what's up? Yeah, how you doing? Instead of like actually making every word count.
Well, actually, you could speak to that since you're a filmmaker. I mean, is the cost of filmmaking going up or down based on the technology? Now that we have streaming and freeze frame and 4K, do you have to cram more into every shot because each frame is going to be dissected more and more?
Well, that's just some of the stuff they say is just an excuse. I mean, you don't have to throw more stuff into a movie just to make it more incredible. I mean, we've seen that process. It was called The Scorpion King. I remember that movie came out. It was no, just having effects to have facts doesn't mean it's a good movie. Like I said before, just having 10,000 people fighting doesn't mean it's good unless there's a story inside that battle.
I remember nothing about that movie other than the horrendous CGI of The Rock.
Dude, I used to when I worked in New York City. This is back when I had like 1,000 DVDs. I had a collection of DVDs, and that's how I really learned about film, was just taking classes and watching DVDs with the sound off, and just studying all the classic films and trying to figure them out. And loving like Paul Thomas Anderson back in the day with Boogie Nights and Martin Scorsese. And I would go at lunch. I did graphics at like a ad agency, and I'd go to the DVD store and I'd get in line and I'd be buying the latest like Boogie Nights or something like that. And the dude in front would just be buying Scorpion King on Blu-ray or, Scorpion King on DVD. And I just sit there like that's the movie, huh? That's it.
You're going to regret this purchase.
That's some common people out there, man. That's the film, man. That horrible, horrible movie. But all that stuff, I could tell you that shooting on video nowadays is cheaper than film. The studios get pissed off at anyone that wants to shoot on film, and only a few big guys like Chris Nolan are actually, or JJ can really demand film. But because it's cheaper. And, people forget. Remember that time when everyone was like, how are they going to, when Lucas Lucas did this, when Lucas pushed video for Phantom Menace, right?
Yeah, Attack of the Clones, actually.
Yeah, was it Attack of the Clones?
Yeah, Attack of the Clones. Sorry,
he was so proud of his all digital rig. Yeah.
Yeah, but then they had to get the film in there and everyone's like, this is going to be so expensive to get the digital cinema displayers or whatever, the projectors. And guess what? They did it, and it's not a big deal. And now the movies show up in a hard drive, and the film isn't. They don't have the film anymore. And so there's not anything like that. I mean, and I think personally, I mean, you remember when movies were. When the special effects would take 2.5 years to do. Yeah. And it takes so long. And now they're putting out Star Wars every 2 years. I mean, my God, he just finished filming a few days ago on the new Star Wars movie. That movie's coming out in 9.5 months.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now, if you go back and look at the special features on the prequel DVD releases, I mean, each one of them says, you go to the Phantom Menace and it says, oh, this took us forever and it cost this much money, and then you go to Attack of the Clones, and they're like, oh, there's been so many advancements since the Phantom Menace, we couldn't do that, but now look what we can do, and then it went money. Again in Episode 3. It's like, oh, now look what we can do. I mean, it's even back then when it was 3 years between movies, it was still a long time, but you could see, like you said, like the progression of like just gets better and better and better. But like you said, I mean,
now we're at the point where we see scenes where we don't even realize that half the scene was in green screen. I mean, the crazy thing is we still have tons of like Marvel movies where you go, wow, that's bad green screen.
Oh yeah.
I mean, even in the latest Avengers movie, there is some really bad green screen. They definitely don't put the movie like the money like Lucasfilm does into that stuff, because I don't think there's a moment in The Last Jedi where you go green screen, Mm-hmm. But there certainly is in Marvel movies.
Don't you wonder if ILM holds back the very best of their stuff for their internal projects?
They're like a band where the headliner won't let the openers use all the lights and all the sound.
It should, but I'm imagining they're owned by Disney at this point too, right? Yeah. I'm imagining they are.
Oh, they are, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if they're allowed to do that.
Oh wait, ILM did ILM get bought up? That's a separate. That's a separate company, I think.
You got to find that out. I don't know.
I thought it was part and parcel. Yeah,
I think it's the same
shows
thing.
What we know.
But yeah, but I just think that all that stuff is excuses, because the hardest thing for anyone is to just write a story. That's why we don't have that many great newbie directors. Not because they can't direct, because it's really damn hard to write a good story.
Well, that gets back to the Legends thing I was talking about, where I love your pitch, but what you proposed for the offspring of the Skywalkers is basically exactly what they did in Legends. And so you throw out Legends continuity, you can't then turn around and put out the exact same story again.
Well, they've been bringing stuff back every movie. They've been bringing stuff back. They brought back Thrawn.
Oh yeah, bits and pieces.
I don't really know why, because he has really done nothing worthwhile since he's come back. Nothing that blows you away. But they, I don't know. It's a strange thing. I just don't. I just said that because they were twins, and it's easy and stuff like that. They could do whatever they want, but just have a team of people and show us them in the future. Wouldn't it have been cool to show Luke as a dad? Wouldn't it have been cool to show him do these things? You could still go through the same things. Princess Leia and Han could die by the end of the third film, and Luke could go into exile. And then the next trilogy is now just the new people that we grew and loved over 3 movies, and then maybe Mark is young enough, and then he comes back in the next trilogy at the end to help or something like that one time, and then that's it. But they decided, JJ with his mystery box, that Luke isn't even in the movie.
See, I don't trust anybody to do that that's currently working on Star Wars, because these are some of the people that decided that it was a good idea that Han Solo dies. And anybody that thinks that's a good idea can go themselves.
And here's the thing, everyone is going off about how he would only come back because that famous story that he wanted to die in Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
They're over pushing that story. Do you think for a second Harrison Ford wouldn't want to be in the second and third film if he could?
If for no other reason but the paycheck that he was given.
Yes.
Didn't he make like 5 to 10 times
he wants to buy, and I don't blame him. He'd be back in a second, and I'm saying all this stuff, and yet, I saw Last Jedi 4 times in the theater, You know, I'm still on the edge of my seat. I love some of the stuff at the end. I just don't know where the vision was, you know?
I suppose the flip side is knowing what it cost to get Harrison to reprise his role for episode 7. Do you really, if you're Disney, want to make that investment in 8 and 9 as well, or do you want to find a way to only pay that once?
Dude, they literally paid twice for Solo by getting rid of the filmmakers.
Yep.
They like doubled their budget without a blink. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
what do you, I don't listen. I don't think Harrison Ford is getting $50 million. He's probably getting $10 to $15 million a film, which is, you know, I'm guessing. Obviously I don't have any facts to there. You know, Harrison Ford is not the draw he used to be. He's in the movie because people love Han Solo, but it's not like everyone in the world is coming just for him anymore. You know, because you know the idea of using a star is to get people to come. I mean, Star Wars obviously can survive without a star. I mean, it makes stars. But yeah, I just, you know, it's just crazy to me. I just can't believe it. And, you know, and that hurt when Han died. That was really like, I was just like, you got to be kidding me.
Right. Well, thanks everybody for checking out another episode of the Nerf Herder Council. As always, we are brought to you by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/NHC for your 30-day trial. You can find the Nerf Herder Council at all of your favorite podcast locations: Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, CastBox. We are on Spotify. You can find all of our episodes on YouTube. The website is nerfherdercouncil.com. Don't forget, you can find us on Facebook. Just look up Nerf Herder Council. You can email us directly at nerfherdercouncil@gmail.com. And we are on Twitter at NHC Podcast. And last but not least, do not forget that you can get your official Nerf Herder Council swag at shop.nerfherdercouncil.com. So once again, I'm your host, JT, at Dog Pound Jedi. He's AJ.
At Drake Adams 579.
He is Steve.
At JSteve1005.
And we will catch you next time.
This bucket of bolts is never gonna get us past that blockade.
This bucket's got a few surprises left in her. Plus, me and Chewie are on it. Ain't that right, Chewie?
Hell yeah, you my Nerf herder.
You my Nerf herder.